In this video, I'll be walking you through the 10 Suzuki books. I'll be discussing the pieces and the skills that you will be learning in each book. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a violinist and teacher. I've been playing the violin for over 20 years. I have my bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance, and I am Suzuki trained. Please take a quick second to make sure that you are subscribed to my channel, especially if you are watching and enjoying my videos. And if you're interested in working with me, you can check out the description for a private lesson application, as well as the waitlist for my online, self-paced, super affordable learning program, Learn Violin Online. So if you're curious about the Suzuki method, you have come to the right place. Like I said, I'm going to be walking you through all 10 Suzuki books and discussing some of the pieces and, more importantly, the skills that you're learning in each book. One of the reasons why I love the Suzuki method is because it is based around learning skills. You're not just learning random pieces, but all the pieces are set out so that you are either learning a new skill or working on one that you have just learned. The pieces really build upon themselves and set you up to become a well-rounded violinist. With all that being said, the Suzuki books can be very hard to go through without a teacher. When I first started my Suzuki training journey, I must admit the skills were not obvious to me on what you should be learning in each piece. So if you're working through the Suzuki books and you're feeling a bit confused or lost without a teacher, I'm going to leave in the description links to all of my Suzuki courses. I currently have courses for books 1 through 6, which you can purchase individually or in a big bundle. Suzuki Book 1, I think, is the hardest book of all. And I know what you might be thinking, Megan, it's book 1. How can it be hard? Well, because the learning curve is so steep. Think about it. When you start book 1, you do not know how to play the violin at all. And by the time you are at the end of book 1, you're already playing I wouldn't even say like beginner pieces. The last piece in book 1 is like low-key kind of hard, so you are playing pieces. In my experience, it usually takes about 1.5 to 2 years to go through book 1. Obviously, that is like such a broad, statement. It really depends on how much you practice and how much prior experience you have. But basically, in Suzuki Book 1, you are learning all of your basic foundational skills that are going to set you up for life. So you are obviously learning about posture. You're learning how to hold the bow. You're learning how to hold the violin. And you are learning how to bow straight and get a decent, pleasing sound. You are learning how to use all 4 of your fingers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you are even learning some different finger placements, namely the high 3rd finger towards the end of the book. Depending on the way you go about the method, you may also be learning to read music. For my own personal students, this really depends on their age. Usually with my children's students, I am not reading music at this point, but with my adult students, I am. When I say I mean them, you know. You're also learning about intonation and how to recognize and hear when your notes are in tune. Obviously, you're also learning about string crossing and bow strokes such as détaché, staccato, and slurs. I also like to introduce very not brief, but like little sections with dynamics towards the end of the book. And these are very basic dynamics, loud and soft. And the way that we do that is just to use more bow when we want to play louder and use less bow when we want to play softer. By the time you finish book 1, you should be able to play the A and D major scales in 1 octave, plus the G major scale in 2 octaves. All of those bow strokes that I mentioned, détaché, staccato, and slurs, up to 4 notes per bow, and all of the basic posture technical things that I mentioned. Book 2 starts off relatively easy, especially compared to the last piece in book 1. Like I said, the last piece in book 1 is pretty challenging, and honestly, sometimes I just skip it because I feel like it's not worth the trouble a lot of the time. Sometimes, not all the time. But I would say the first half of Book 2 is not any more technically difficult than Book 1. In fact, up until you get to the 2 grenadiers, there's actually no new skills introduced. You are simply refining skills that you've already worked on. So that's things like trickier bowing patterns. I also like to start to talk about the concept of resonant intonation, which is the idea that your violin will tell you when you're in tune. Anytime you hit a G, D, A, or E, that note should ring and resonate and tell you that you're in tune. In 2 grenadiers, however, a lot changes. So we're in a minor key. We start out in the key of D minor, and also the ideas of flat taps are introduced. We're also learning about the low first finger and low fourth finger, and have a new rhythm, a dotted quarter followed by, a dotted eighth note followed by a 16th note. Witch's Dance builds upon this idea by adding in those low ones and those low fours and building upon that dotted eighth note 16th rhythm and adding in triplets. And in the Gavotte for Meghan, we have our first pizzicato chord. I like to start teaching shifting around the Lully Gavotte. You don't have to shift in this piece, but I like to do it because I feel like you have to learn shifting anyway, so might as well do it now. And then at the end of the book, I like to start teaching vibrato. So by the time you end this or are finished with this book, you should be able to play G major scale 2 octave, that's from book 1, 1 octave D minor scale, 2 octave B flat major scale. You should be familiar with low 1s and low 4s, and have started shifting in vibrato. Book 3 is relatively short. It's only 7 pieces, but they are so beautiful, in my opinion. The first piece can get a little annoying because it's so repetitive and it's pretty hard for the memory. Starting in the minuet, which is the second piece in book 3, I add at least 1 shift in every single piece so that we are shifting more and more. In fact, in the Humoresque and the Becker Gavotte, I am shifting a ton. I'm having my students shift a ton between first and third positions. This is also when we introduce double stops and at the end of the book, chords. This is also the time when students should be adding in vibrato to their pieces. So we started vibrato at the end of book 2 and we're continuing to develop it in the beginning of book 3. By the time we're at the end of book 3, we should be vibrating on like very long notes. Think like the last note of the piece or the last note of the section. So by the time you're finished with book 3, you should be able to relatively easily shift between first and third position, vibrate on some notes in your pieces. You should be familiar with the 2 octave D major and D minor scales and have started working on double stops and chords. Book 4 is when the true fun begins. First of all, we have actual concertos for the very first time, so that is always something important to explain and to know what concertos are. The third piece in book 4 has a very large double stop section, so I like to make sure that my students are practicing several double stop exercises before we get to that, because if not, that can be quite a shock. And I like to introduce second position in book 4 as well. There's some passages in the Vivaldi A minor that use second position, as well as the Bach double at the end of the book. So by the time students are done with book 4, they should be proficient in positions 1, 2, and 3. Be confident with their vibrato and adding it into pieces. In book 5, I introduce 4th and 5th position because they will need it for the concerto, the Vivaldi G minor concerto. This is the first time that we have a full concerto in a Suzuki book, and yes, it is long, and yes, it's a good idea to play it from beginning to end to work on your stamina. Book 5 is also the time where I like to start discussing contact points as a way of changing your sound. So in books 1 and 2, the way we were changing our sound was just by using more or less bow. In book 3, we started to experiment with bow speed. In book 4, we started, didn't start, but we did more bow speed and bow weight. And in book 5, it's contact point. The Vivaldi G minor shifts between positions 1 to 5, so it's important to do exercises for all of those positions as well. The Vericini Jig is also another challenge because it's in a new time signature, 12-8, so it's really important to make sure that they can count in time signatures that have an 8 on the bottom. It's not the first time we saw that back in book 4, but 12-8 is definitely new. Once a student has finished book 5, I would consider them like an upper intermediate player. At this point, when they're entering book 6, they have learned pretty much all of the skills that they are going to need to carry them throughout their violin career. You haven't learned 100% of everything because there's some bow strokes that we haven't done yet. But we've covered, shifting through positions 1 through 5. I also like to start 3 octave scales and arpeggios at this time. Double stops, chords. So at this point, students are well prepared. Like I said, they've learned like 85 to 90% of, things they need to know for their violin career. Now, this isn't to say like they've played the hardest repertoire ever or anything like that, because there's definitely still a lot to go. But in terms of new skills, there's not too much. It's mostly just bow strokes. Book 6 is where I tend to start veering away a little bit from Suzuki. I always do the La Folia, which is the first piece, one, because I just really love it, and two, because it's definitely very challenging. It has some really hard like double stops and chords at the end, which I think are great for students to learn. And then I like to pick one of the Handel sonatas. Usually I do the F major because I like it the most, but you could do D major if you wanted. And then the Fiocco Allegro to work on fast playing. In Book 7, the piece that I love to do is the Bach A minor concerto. At this point, all of the pieces left are Baroque. So I think that it is important to start branching out. When students are at the Book 6, Book 7 level, that's a good time to start adding in side pieces like Meditation from Thais, Chardas, maybe even the Paganini Cantabile. And of course, students should be working through their 3-octave scales and arpeggios at this point as well. In Book 8, the big piece is the Eccles Sonata. And then Books 9 and 10 are just Mozart concertos. So Book 9 is Mozart 4, and then Book 10 is Mozart 5. I honestly don't know a ton of people that go all the way through the Suzuki books, Books 1 through 10. Most people drop off about at 6 or 7 because, like I said, at that point, you've pretty much learned most of your skills. And honestly, the skills that you still need, like I said, the bow technique, you're not going to learn in Suzuki. Suzuki never really goes through like the spiccato or the ricochet or anything like that. You have to kind of use outside exercises to get that part of your technique. So for reference, I started playing when I was 7 with the Suzuki books, and I finished going through Suzuki when I think I was in 6th grade, and I was in Book 6. So that is all 10 Suzuki books explained. Obviously, this was a very brief overview of all 10 of them, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what to expect if you're going through the method. Check out my Suzuki courses, and please make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for watching.